There's a lot going on in Washington, D.C. on FISA, on security, on what's happening, even securing inside the United States. And the FBI Director Christopher Wray, going before committees and is getting blasted by members of Congress as well when he does go before those committees about how they have handled the FBI, the policies of the FBI, to the point, Logan, where we've got members of Congress, and we'll play it for people. Can we play it first? This is Congressman Mike Garcia, and they're being very direct with how they feel about Christopher Wray when he testifies to them. Take a listen.
I'll be honest with you, and this pains me to say this, but I don't trust you. I don't think that this is necessarily a funding problem that we have for your agency as much as a leadership problem. And between the lack of transparency in hearings like this and in intel hearings, your weaponization and politicization of issues and instruments of national security against innocent Americans and against institutions like churches, and the fact that you have held no one truly accountable for prior FISA abuses that we have all seen and recognized. I think you yourself have acknowledged that there's been abuses. And
so there you go, Logan. And part of our national security that we know has been so abused against American citizens, and specifically, targeting President Trump, the Trump campaign, those associated with President Trump, instead of, actual terrorists and dangerous foreign actors. It's great to be joined by our senior advisor for foreign policy and national security, the former director of national intelligence, Rick Grinnell. Because, Rick, we heard in a congressional hearing yesterday straight up from Congressman Mike Garcia that he just told the FBI Director Christopher Wray, we don't trust you anymore when you come and testify. We don't trust that you're focusing on the right issues, that you're focusing on putting agents in churches, but you're not, again, dealing with the actual threats that America faces. And so a lot of this was on Section 702, the wiretapping, and, of course, the FISA court, and how many reforms should be done. There's a whole list of almost 60. It's now down to 6. A couple have gotten through so far in the House. But we've been part of those advocates that say it may be one like the IRS that we believe could be beyond self-correction, Rick. And I kind of wanted your thoughts on that. Do you think FISA can be fixed through amendment processes, or do you think it needs to be kind of thrown out the door and something else to replace it needs to be ready to go? I think that will serve a purpose, but with much more, safeguards on the rails.
Yeah, well, first of all, let's just start from every single person that I know wants to make sure that we're stopping terrorism and that we're using all of the tools of the federal government. But the 702 FISA is not the only tool. And shame on anyone who pretends like this is the only tool that we have. This is one of the tools, but it's one of the tools that's being abused. And I can tell you unequivocally that what Congress writes into a law, the intel community manipulates and abuses. I should say some in the intel community manipulate and abuse their power. And that's what we're trying to solve for. How do you get the tool without allowing there to be an abuse? And the abuse is that individuals who are gathering intelligence are allowed to listen in on Americans if their strategy was to listen in on a foreigner. And so they have been able to manipulate this process to say, oh, I'm really going after a foreigner, but they're listening to a U.S. official. And by the way, Jordan, these U.S. officials sometimes are members of Congress. Members of Congress need to be much smarter about what's happening. I have been a part of the arguments inside the intel community where I've had to push back on how they classify that U.S. official who may happen to be a member of Congress so that they don't give away a description that everyone would then know exactly who they're talking to, who got wrapped up into this conversation. And so the abuse is real. And for anyone to just look at a piece of paper and say, oh, no, we've got a way to get around this, I see it on paper, they don't understand the actual practice versus the academic exercise of writing a bill in Congress.
Do you believe in this presidential election that enough safeguards have been put in place where the FBI has been shamed enough publicly that they would not try to do what they did to President Trump in the first election?
I think we've done a good job of showing the abuses and the bad actors within the FBI, but they haven't made any changes or any adjustments. For anyone to believe that somehow it's not going to happen again, you have to believe that the shaming of Christopher Wray worked and that somehow he then went to his deputies and pulled back. I don't believe that. I think Christopher Wray has lost credibility. I was a big advocate for getting rid of him in the Trump administration. I don't believe that Chris Wray and his placed political deputies and leadership have demonstrated that they are willing to be nonpartisan. I think they are partisan. They've burned their credibility. They need to be removed, and we need to bring people in who are much more committed to making sure that the FBI is used to protect Americans, not go after Americans that they just disagree with politically.
That ties exactly into what I wanted to ask you about next, which is, again, because those changes haven't been made, even though some of these small changes may be made, these 6 amendments, that's not really going to slow the FBI down too much on, again, when it comes to trying to get at potentially political candidates. We'll see if that even gets through the final, vote. We don't even know if that's going to happen yet. So, but with the potential for that abuse, even in this election, I think, Rick, it just underscores the importance of the work of the ACLJ right now in this moment, because we have to be prepared now that the FBI is planning some new crossfire rays or crossfire hurricane to damage President Trump, and it could come at any moment. Usually it's later in the campaign cycle, and they've got him stuck, of course, the lawfare they're using against him in court. So it's like a dual-edged sword coming from DOJ and FBI. But the ACLJ is here to point it out, protect it, and fight back. And, of course, work with the members of Congress to make sure we can get as many reforms in as possible and call the bad actors inside these agencies to the committees and call them out.
One of the reasons I love being a part of the ACLJ is because it's a substantive conversation about the issues. We're not just an organization that is one-dimensional and just kind of talks about basic talking points on an issue. I mean, take for instance, my friend Mike Pompeo and I both are part of the ACLJ, and we disagree on issues. And there's a thoughtful conversation. There's a thoughtful focus on the difference of the issues. And that's what I love about ACLJ, is you're going to get thought-provoking analysis as well as a serious look at the issues with lawyers who know the process, with individuals who know how to get stuff done. We come at this from a very conservative arena, but even within the ideas of the conservative movement, there are differing opinions, and you're going to get those on ACLJ.
Rick, as always, we appreciate you being part of our team.